This is East Asia Tonight.
Good evening, I'm Otelia Duets. Tonight's top stories. Beijing pours scorn on claims that Chinese jets twice locked their radar onto Japanese aircraft. It says the Japanese jets intruded into a Chinese military exercise. Hong Kong's leader hails a new crop of lawmakers for its patriots-only legislature as a driver of reform after the city's deadliest fire in decades, though turnout in Sunday's vetted poll barely rose from 4 years ago. Thousands of civilians fleeing after Thailand launched airstrikes along its disputed border with Cambodia, killing at least 4 people. Both sides accuse the other of breaking the ceasefire deal. And China signals more support for its slowing economy. The Politburo saying that domestic demand will be a key focus, with more proactive policies on the way. Also in the bulletin, the European Union's push away from Chinese telecoms infrastructure. Get expert insights on the dilemma member states are facing as they weigh national security with economic considerations. And production houses in India taking a cue from what has long been a mainstay for many Chinese mobile users. Microdramas that last just minutes, a trend that could reshape India's media industry. China has demanded Japan stop what it describes as irresponsible hype and politicking after Tokyo accused Chinese aircraft of locking radar onto Japanese fighter jets over the weekend. Beijing says it was conducting a routine drill in line with international law.
此次事件的关键是日本战斗机擅自闯入中方演训区域，对中方军事活动抵近侦察干扰。 还恶人先告状，炒作所谓雷达照射问题，颠倒黑白，嫁祸于人，误导国际社会。
Japan said J-15 jets from China's Liaoning aircraft carrier locked radar on Japanese planes twice on Saturday. No damage or injuries were reported. Fighter jets use radar for fire control to identify targets and for search and rescue operations. The incident happened in international waters near Okinawa and is the latest in the row between the two sides after Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi's comments about Taiwan.
今回のレーダー照射というのは航空機の安全な飛行に必要な範囲を超える危険な行為でございます。でこのような事案が発生したことはもう極めて残念です。で中国側には強く抗議し再発防止をこの厳重に申し入れするということを行いました。冷静かつ毅然と対応してまいります。
Right, for more, let's go to CNA's senior correspondent, Han Yu-Guan in Shanghai, as well as Michio Ishida in Tokyo. We're going to start with you first, Yu-Guan. The Chinese Navy said that Japan's moves basically amount to harassment. Do you have any more details on that?
Well, the Chinese Navy's position is basically this. It was conducting military exercise in international waters. The exercise was announced ahead of time. And it was the Japanese jets that repeatedly approached the training area, creating what the Navy spokesperson called safety risks for Chinese pilots. The spokesperson also rubbished Japan's claim that Chinese jet fighters locked fire control radar onto Japanese jets. He says that the Japanese account was completely inconsistent with the facts and accused Tokyo of slandering China. It was a stance that was echoed by the Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson during its regular news briefing today. The spokesperson also added that it's common practice for carrier-based aircraft to activate such radar during flight training, calling it a normal operation to ensure flight safety. The Foreign Ministry spokesperson further accused the Japanese side of hyping up the radar issue, distorting the truth and misleading international community. He urged Japan to immediately cease the dangerous actions of interfering with China's normal training activities and to stop all irresponsible hype and political manipulation. So Both the Chinese Navy and the Foreign Ministry are speaking in unison. Both deny any radar lock, accuses Japan of provoking, and warns that further interference may trigger what it calls necessary measures to protect China's security. Otelli?
The rift, no doubt, deepening. Mitch, Japan's chief cabinet secretary, I believe, spoke to reporters today. Can you just run us through some of the key things that he said?
Yes, well, Minoru Kihara said in his regular news conference today that locking radar is a dangerous act for air safety, that it is regrettable such an incident took place. He said Tokyo issued a strong complaint and demanded Beijing never to do it again. And Mr. Kihara said Japan will remain calm and resolute. According to the Japanese government, Beijing locked down radar for a few minutes on Japan's first aircraft and then 30 minutes on the second. Now, the Self-Defense Force was on duty to monitor possible intrusion on Japan's airspace by maintaining safe distance. Well, security experts in Japan are wondering if it's another retaliatory act by Beijing in response to Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi's stance towards possibility of exercising collective defense in the event of contingency on the Taiwan Strait. Now, so far, Beijing has called its citizens to refrain from traveling to Japan and suspended the import of Japanese marine products. This is not the first time such incident has happened of Beijing towards the Self-Defense Force. Back in 2013, Tokyo claimed a Japanese destroyer Yudachi was targeted by a fire control radar launched from a Chinese warship in the East China Sea. But Beijing did not admit it had. It happened a year after Tokyo purchased Senkaku islets from its private Japanese owner to consolidate its control. China also claims the islets and called them Diaoyi. And Japan is not the only country that's experienced China's radar lock. Australia said it did in February 2022. It's by Chinese vessels sailing through the sea between Papua New Guinea and Australia. Germany's aircraft was targeted this July during its participation in a drill in the Red Sea. The concern here is the recent incident could only be just one instance of escalation of tension in the region.
Hey, thanks for that. CNA's senior correspondent Michio Ishida in Tokyo, as well as Tan Yu-Guan in Shanghai. Grant Newsham, senior research fellow at the Japan Forum for Strategic Studies, shares his insights on the message China's trying to send.
If you think of it as pointing a gun at somebody, getting them into the sights, all you have to do is then pull the trigger. And that's what the Chinese have done. This is not at all normal behavior. It's the behavior really of somebody who's out looking for a fight, wants to hurt somebody, wants to kill somebody, and looking for a provocation from the Japanese. And that's what the Chinese have been doing for, goodness, 15 years now, trying to get the Japanese to just fire one shot. And that would give the Chinese the ability to say, well, you started it, now we have no choice. The Japanese have not taken the bait yet. But this is very serious. It's evidence that the Chinese really are not letting up on Japan, and they are trying to both destroy Prime Minister Takaichi, but also to create some distance and friction between the Americans and the Japanese. This is certainly something directed from the top, and it is in line with a much broader set of pressures and harassments and bullying that the Chinese have been putting on the Japanese in recent times. It's economic, psychological, lawfare, going to the United Nations, and this is just the military part of it. The fact they were actually doing these exercises near Okinawa, that too is part of the harassment package from the Chinese. The Pacific Ocean's a big place, and there's a lot of other places that they could have done it. But in the Chinese system, there's no upside to picking a fight like this. If you're the fighter pilot or the local commander, this always comes from the top.
Well, do head over to our website, cna.asia, for more analysis on this diplomatic row, including the timeline of events that led to increased tensions between the two East Asian neighbors. Now, Hong Kong voted in its 8th Legislative Council, 12 days after a fiery blaze ripped through a housing estate, leaving 159 dead and lots of questions in its wake. The newly elected vowed to support investigations and safety reforms. Deborah Wong with this report.
This is Hong Kong's 8th Legislative Council, a lineup comprising 40 new faces and a slate that has greater links to mainland Chinese enterprises. Chief Executive John Lee said the smooth running of the election shows electors' support for the government's recovery and reform work. He earlier pledged to put forward a proposal on that at the first LegCo meeting. There were fewer registered voters this year. Voter turnout rose slightly as percentage of eligible voters, although it's the second lowest on record. Hong Kong's biggest political party in the legislature, the pro-Beijing DAB, scored a major win, securing 20 out of the 26 seats it contested in, although vote share slipped from 2021.
我哋睇到喺嗰個選舉過程裏面呢，有人係借呢個火災去抹黑民建聯，呢一個呢對我哋嘅選情呢確實係做咗一啲嘅影響，但係我相信呢市民嘅眼睛係雪亮嘅，佢哋都係對民建聯係有期望，亦都係希望我哋呢當選之後呢盡快地幫佢去做好重建家園嘅工作。
Mr. Chan retained his seat in the New Territories Northeast constituency, which encompasses Tai Po, the site of the deadly blaze. Meanwhile, the Hong Kong Federation of Trade Unions, the largest and oldest pro-Beijing labour group, only won 7 out of the 16 seats it challenged.
特別咧係點樣能夠配合到特區政府加快嗰個嘅重建，同埋咧做好個調查工作。如果調查結果出咗嚟之後，揾到問題根源之後咧，係點樣去具體落實有關嘅一啲嘅調查好好嘅建議？喺呢個社會裏面呢一個普遍嘅共識，亦係啲立法會裏面咧好多當選嘅立法會議員裏面咧都係一個嘅比較重要嘅一個嘅共識。
The work starts now with systemic reforms to construction safety standards on the table. Residents are holding lawmakers to their campaign promise as Hong Kong seeks answers to the Tai Po fire. The 8th LegCo has their work cut out for them. Deborah Wong, CNA, Hong Kong.
A German Foreign Minister Johann Wadephol is in China for his first visit amid a toughening of Berlin's stance on Beijing over geopolitical conflicts and trade disputes. While the diplomat is set to meet with his Chinese counterpart, Wang Yi, today, with talks expected to focus on trade ties between the two economies. Mr. Wadephol also expected to speak with the Chinese trade minister and the head of the Communist Party's International Relations Department. Ahead of his visit, the German diplomat said that direct talks with China is especially needed, especially at a time of growing international tension and geopolitical upheaval. He also emphasized that security and prosperity in Germany, as well as in Europe, are closely linked to China, even though perspectives may differ. Separately, Mr. Wadephol said that he made progress in getting Beijing to grant rare earth export licenses to German manufacturers, but noted that Germany firms are not in the first batch issued by Beijing. And these minerals are used in sectors ranging from autos to defense, and has caused months of disruption since China introduced export controls in April due to the trade war between US and China. A time now for a short break, but coming up on East Asia tonight, China's trade surplus breaks the $1 trillion mark, even as exports to the US tumble. And later, we'll look into why Chinese retail investors are swarming to chip makers. Hello there, you're watching East Asia tonight, and we've got Roland Lim now here with the business news. So, Roland, we're talking about China's exports today. It's bouncing back alongside its critical mineral shipments. Tell us more about that.
You heard right, Otelia. Analysts say that this rebound could bolster growth heading into 2026, though weak domestic demand remains a concern. China's rare earth exports jumped in November, the first full month since US and Chinese presidents agreed to speed up shipments of the critical minerals from the world's largest refiner. Now, they rose more than 26% from October to close to 5,500 metric tons. Export controls over the 17 minerals used in industries from autos to consumer electronics and defense have caused months of disruption since their April introduction. The jump in rare earths part of a broader rebound thanks to the fresh tariff truce with the US agreed upon in late October. Overseas shipments in November jumped nearly 6% on year, beating estimates from economists and reversing a decline the month before. Imports increased around 2% on year, though missing expectations. Now, this pushes its trade surplus past $1 trillion for the first time in any year, even as shipments to the US dropped nearly 29% on year. Manufacturers rushed to move goods to take advantage of the tariff agreement between the US and China. But the trade milestone risks drawing scrutiny from other countries that find Chinese products hurting their domestic industries. It also highlights how exports remains a key pillar of China's economy despite efforts to rebalance it. Let's take a look at the market reaction. The Shanghai Composite ending the day 0.5% higher. Shenzhen Component doing better. It's up 1.4% for the day, but bucking the trend. Hong Kong's Hang Seng Index ending 1.23 in the red. A top decision-making body of the ruling Communist Party of China pledging to expand domestic demand and to support the broader economy with more proactive policies in 2026. The Politburo says the country would seek progress while maintaining stability and coordinating its domestic and international economic work and trade battles next year more efficiently. Now, the remarks comes ahead of the annual Central Economic Work Conference, which sets key targets and policy intentions for next year. The Politburo also highlighted the need to advance the development of a unified national market and to continue preventing and diffusing risks in areas of concern, which experts say refer to dangers in local government debt, property, and financial sectors. Beijing is still grappling with a range of challenges to sustained growth, including sluggish demand, a prolonged property crisis, persistent deflationary pressures, and an aging population. Investors and economists now waiting for the annual Central Economic Work Conference in the coming days. China's Dalian Wanda's group's commercial real estate arm seeking a 2-year extension to a $400 million bond, making it the latest developer to delay repayments as the country's property crisis deepens. Wanda Commercial Management says it's asking note holders to push the maturity of its 11% dollar notes to February of 2028, with repayment to be made in installments while keeping interest unchanged. The company had previously postponed payments of other offshore bonds and has been exploring options to manage about $700 million in upcoming obligations. The request comes as stress intensifies across China's property sector. A major developer, China Vanke, has also proposed delaying payments on local notes, rattling markets and dragging the nation's dollar junk bonds to their lowest levels in more than 18 months. Wanta has been restructuring its finances for more than a year now, including extending another bond to 2026 and giving up control of its mall management unit in an $8.5 billion deal. Chip-related IPOs in China drawing intense retail interest, spurred by Beijing's push for self-sufficiency as it stays locked in a race with the US over technology. Now, 2 of them headed for a debut in Shanghai, with their retail tranches oversubscribed by nearly 3,000 times. The semiconductor manufacturers are Meta X Integrated Circuits and Beijing On Micro Electronics, a specialist in radio frequency chips. Now, Meta X, that's a GPU maker, is pricing shares at 104.66 yuan apiece and drew nearly 3 trillion yuan. That's roughly $424 billion in bids, while On Micro is priced at 83.06 yuan apiece and attracted some 1.4 trillion yuan in bids. That's close to $200 billion US. The frenzy comes on top of the heels of another chip firm, More Threads. Last week's IPO, its shares soared at 425%. Before its debut, the GPU maker also attracted robust demand, with subscriptions exceeding supply by about 2,750 times. Investors are betting the company could become a homegrown rival to NVIDIA in artificial intelligence chips. That's a sector China sees as crucial to achieving technological self-sufficiency. PopMart shares slipping again. Hong Kong listed stock fell as much as 8.6%, extending a nearly 40% slide from its August peak. This after analysts warned Black Friday sales in the US may have disappointed. Media reports suggest weaker than expected US demand could undermine confidence in Chinese toy makers' growth, and especially after the company posted a more than 1,200% sales growth in America last quarter. Now, the Labubu maker has faced mounting worries over its product pipeline, with short interest rising to the highest level since last year. A leading global investment and research firm estimates that PopMart's North America sales growth could have slowed to below 500% this quarter. Chinese production houses have long been pumping out micro dramas that are 2 to 3 minutes long and streaming directly to mobile devices. Now, that phenomenon, too, is on the rise in India, where millions of viewers are abandoning hour-long television serials in favor of the shorter format. And major players are betting that this format could reshape the media industry. Ishan Garg files this report for CNA from New Delhi.
Lights, camera. The ingredients of a micro-drama are no different from a Netflix series or a Bollywood movie. But the result? These short, punchy pieces that deliver a twist or a cliffhanger in under 3 minutes. Anish Surana runs Ananta Productions, one of India's early micro-drama makers. He says it's the instant payoff that keeps audiences coming back.
It's basically you getting that dopamine high, which you get with that instant gratification. Means 2 minutes, I've seen something, it has given us the high of a hook, and I want to watch it again.
The same dopamine rush that fuels social media now driving this new kind of storytelling. Popularized in China, micro-dramas are finding new fans in India. Analysts predict the sector could be worth more than $1 billion in the next 5 years. And the drivers of this growth, not just people in metropolitan towns like Delhi or Mumbai, but viewers in India's smaller cities too. People like Bhure Singh say they are hooked.
खाली समय रहता है तो वो देखते हैं. मैं तो खाली बैठा रहता हूँ, राइड आती है कोई तो लेता हूँ, नहीं तो खाली बैठा हूँ 1 घंटे 2 घंटे तो यही देखता रहता हूँ. जब दूसरी कोई राइड आ गई तो इसे बंद कर देता हूँ, फिर कहीं बैठ गया तो फिर देखने लगता हूँ इसे. ऐसे लगभग 5-6 घंटे मेरे निकल जाते.
With more than 659 million smartphone users, India seems a natural market for mobile-first storytelling.
And vertical format content is the future, according to investors. This year, they widened their bet on short content platforms, investing $48 million, up from $28 million last year.
But with more than 15 players now in the race, platforms must compete harder to stand out.
It is about consistency and the niches and the themes that you stick with. Because if you are confusing the audiences, one day you are offering drama, next day you are offering crime fiction, and next day you are offering a musical, it's going to totally confuse the audiences. They don't want to come to you because you offer an entire potpourri of options. They will come to you because you will offer to them something which they relate you with.
For Surana and his team, the goal now is to take Indian micro-dramas to the world and compete with Chinese creators who already have a strong foothold abroad. The biggest fans, though, remain at home, snacking on these bite-sized episodes. And the producers say their journey is just beginning towards establishing micro-dramas as a true alternative to reels, TV shows and full-length films. For CNA in New Delhi, I'm Ishan Garg.
And that's your business news at this hour. We'll tell you.
Thanks so much for that, Roland. Okay, let's go for a break now. But coming up next on East Asia tonight, few surprises in Hong Kong's second such patriots-only Legislative Council poll, even as turnout marginally improves from the previous election. A discussion on what that indicates with an expert next. This is East Asia tonight, and here are the headlines you're following. Beijing pours scorn on claims that Chinese jets twice locked their radar onto Japanese aircraft. It says the Japanese jets intruded into a Chinese military exercise. Thousands of civilians fleeing after Thailand launched airstrikes along its disputed border with Cambodia, killing at least 4 people, as both sides accuse the other of breaking a ceasefire deal. And Hong Kong's leader welcomes a new crop of lawmakers for the territory's patriots-only legislature as a drive of reform, though turnout in Sunday's vetted poll barely rose from 4 years ago. Now, the incoming lawmakers marking their success in polls under the shadow of Hong Kong's deadliest fire in decades. Residents have expressed optimism that the new leaders can help the city overcome the disaster.
大家咧，因為呢個火災咧都心情唔好嘅，所以咧都希望大家走出嚟，即係選啲比較係做到嘢嘅人咁樣解啫嚇。
期望就係幫到低層啦，係啊，中層啦，係啦，係啊，最主要係幫到市民咯，真係㗎。跟住火災啦，最主要幫到嗰啲災民咯，咁樣咯。
For more, let's bring in Ho Lok Sung, Honorary Research Fellow, Pan Sutong Shanghai Hong Kong Economic Policy Research Institute, Lingnan University. Well, thanks, Professor Ho, for joining us this evening. We're just going to kick things off with a big picture question. How do you read the election results? Any surprises there? Some 40% of them are newcomers. What does it tell us about the direction that you think Beijing is steering the city?
Yes, apparently Beijing is intent on bringing new fresh blood to the LegCo. There actually, if you look at the results, I don't see a lot of much surprises at all. Some of those people that we had expected to win, they do win, and I think. The balance is still, of course, definitely very much in favor of the predominant parties.
Right, and of course, timing is everything in politics. This vote came pretty soon after the city's deadliest fire in decades. Holding this election so quickly, I mean, that seemed like it was a political choice, but do you think it paid off for the patriots-only camp?
Well, I actually do agree with the government for keeping the election date intact because it's really necessary for a lot of things to step ahead. We cannot afford to have any vacuum period, so we do need to have the election in time so that the new legislators can start working as soon as possible, just after the new year.
Professor Ho, I just want to drill down on that turnout figure over the weekend. It edged up only slightly to about 32%. It's still among the lowest, I think second lowest in Hong Kong's post-handover history and under these new rules. How do you think Beijing is reading into that number?
Well, you see, as far as I'm concerned, I'm not so much concerned about the low turnout. As a matter of fact, I have read Jason Brennan, who had always been advising that if you're not well prepared, if you have not done your homework, better stay away and do not cast a vote. Because if you cast a vote and you elect people that you don't really know whether they're good or bad, that it may be very good, very bad for the country or for our city. So given the fact that in fact most voters do not have much knowledge about the background of these contending legislators, it's very difficult for them to cast an honest vote. That will make any significant impact. So I think it's really much more important to make sure that the government takes the problems that it confronts seriously, and especially I'm concerned about the government really have to consider cost versus benefits for every single policy that it implements.
So, yeah, can you elaborate a little bit more on that? You said cost versus benefits, right? Now the government especially is talking about change, talking about
cost
renewal.
versus benefits. That is something that I have a lot of a very strong view on. Because in the past there have been lots of policies which are based on a kind of for me it's a bit impulsive kind of decision, and I think it's really necessary to have a well thought out strategy considering cost versus benefits from a social point of view. Just for example, give you this example, like very quickly the CE called off, mandated that everybody has to take out all these nets, that would keep any debris that might fall down to and might hurt people. They have to be taken down, all without regard to whether they honestly put up and compliant with the requirements, or whether they are there was falsification. In my point of view, I think they really should ask those people who had who had done wrong things to pull down those nets and let those honest ones to stay on. And if they anyone is found having nets that do not comply with the requirements, then they should be penalized very severely.
Yeah, so just picking up on that point, Professor Ho, about what you are saying, basically all of this, what's happening, it's sitting against very raw public mood, right? I mean, we've had that fire. There were also some arrests linked to calls for boycotts, and there's that low turnout we talk about. So if you could characterize the mood in Hong Kong right now, right? All that frustration, where is all that frustration going if it can't be expressed at the ballot box?
I think everybody wants the government, to really look, to understand the deep-seated causes. This kind of rigged bidding, is a very serious problem that has been harming Hong Kong for at least 2 decades. The government really has to look into it and really have to root out those problems.
Well, thanks very much for helping us.
And I think everybody is really looking for the government to implement drastic reforms. And one of the things that I applaud would be, for example, banning cigarette smoking, banning smoking on construction sites completely. And I think that's already a belated move, and it should be done. Right now, it's not completely banned.
All right.
Only some
we hear you loud
parts
and clear,
of
Professor, but we have run out of time. Thank you so very much for helping us unpack what the results really mean for Hong Kong's future. Really appreciate your time there, Professor Ho Lok Sang, speaking to us from the Lingnan University. All right, now to a developing story beyond East Asia. Tensions reigniting between Thailand and Cambodia, as both sides blame the other for breaching a ceasefire agreement brokered by the US President and Malaysian Prime Minister. Now, Bangkok announcing that it has launched airstrikes after fighting at its disputed border intensified. Thai Prime Minister Anutin Charnvirakul spoke in a televised address following the clashes, where he said his country does not want to see violence, but military operations would be carried out as necessary.
รัฐบาลขอยืนยันว่าประเทศไทยจะดำรงความมุ่งมั่นสูงสุดในการปกป้องอธิปไตยและบูรณภาพแห่งดินแดนของชาติตามหลักกฎหมายระหว่างประเทศและสิทธิในการป้องกันตนเองโดยชอบธรรมและในวันนี้ได้มีการประชุมสภาความมั่นคงแห่งชาติโดยมีมติยืนยันว่ารัฐบาลจะดำเนินการตามมติสภาความมั่นคงแห่งชาติก็คือจะมีการปฏิบัติการทางทหารในทุกกรณีตามเงื่อนไขของสถานการณ์ที่เกิดขึ้นและให้มีการปฏิบัติการทางทหารในเรื่องอื่นๆที่มีความจำเป็น
Malaysian Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim is urging both sides to exercise maximum restraint, warning that the fighting risks undoing the work that went into achieving the ceasefire. Bangkok says its airstrikes will only target Cambodian military sites and that it will not harm civilians. It's aiming to suppress what it calls continued supporting fire attacks. Civilians across 4 border districts are being evacuated. The Thai army accused Phnom Penh of initiating attacks on its troops yesterday afternoon and this morning, saying that one of its soldiers was killed and 8 others wounded.
ข้อมูลทางด้านการข่าวก็ยังพบว่าทหารกัมพูชามีการเตรียมความพร้อมของกำลังพลแล้วก็ยุทโธปกรณ์นะครับแล้วก็อาวุธยิงสนับสนุนเพิ่มเติมนะเข้ามาในพื้นที่เพิ่มขึ้นนะครับรวมถึงมีแนวโน้มว่าทางกัมพูชามีการระบุพิกัดนะครับการใช้อาวุธระยะไกลมายังพื้นที่ตอนในนะครับครอบคลุมพื้นที่ใกล้สนามบินบุรีรัมย์นะครับรวมถึงบริเวณพื้นที่ใกล้โรงพยาบาลในอำเภอปราสาทนะครับซึ่งพื้นที่เหล่านั้นอยู่ห่างจากชายแดนถึง30 กิโลเมตร
Tensions between the two countries escalated recently over a landmine explosion last month, despite international efforts to end the conflict. The border dispute had erupted into a 5-day war back in July that killed at least 48 people and temporarily displaced about 300,000. Now, Cambodia has accused Thailand of violating its ceasefire, calling for international condemnation. The country's defense ministry earlier said that Thailand had opened fire first after days of continued provocations.
ក្នុងន័យនេះកម្ពុជាសូមអំពាវនាវឲ្យសហគមន៍អន្តរជាតិកោតទោសយ៉ាងម៉ឺងម៉ាត់ចំពោះការរំលោភបំពានលើសេចក្តីថ្លែងការណ៍រួមស្តីពីកិច្ចព្រមព្រៀងសន្តិភាពរវាងកម្ពុជាថៃនិងសកម្មភាពខុសច្បាប់របស់ថៃម្ដងហើយម្ដងទៀតដោយទាមទារឲ្យថៃទទួលខុសត្រូវទាំងស្រុងចំពោះអំពើរំលោភបំពានដ៏កម្រនេះកម្ពុជាអំពាវនាវឲ្យភាគីថៃបញ្ឈប់រាល់អំពើអរិភាពជាបន្ទាន់ដែលគំរាមកំហែងដល់សន្តិភាពស្ថិរភាពនៅក្នុងតំបន់
Phnom Penh says at least 4 civilians in one of its border provinces have been seriously injured following the fighting. The deputy governor of Oda Mien Che, a border region in Cambodia's northwest, reported that the casualties were hurt in an attack by Thai military forces. Medical evacuation is underway. Now, Cambodia denied claims that it initiated the attacks and that it had used destructive weapons along its border with Thailand. A former Prime Minister Hun Sen accused what he called Thai aggressors of trying to provoke Phnom Penh into breaking their ceasefire. He urged Cambodian forces to exercise restraint amid the alleged attacks. The Defense Ministry added that its military did not fire back and informed the ASEAN Observer team about the incident. The Cambodian government also plans to request that the regional grouping launch a probe into the matter. Coming up next on East Asia Tonight, an expert's take on how the European Union's push to hang up on Chinese telecom infrastructure is going. French President Emmanuel Macron has returned from another state visit to China, the latest EU leader to hold these one-on-one talks with Chinese President Xi Jinping in Beijing. But there was no breakthrough in the telecom sector as the European Commission looks at ways to force EU member states to phase out using Chinese companies, Huawei and ZTE, the national mobile infrastructure, over national security concerns. Ross Cullen files this report for CNA from Paris.
There are more than 30 European nations, both EU member states and non-member states, who have launched 5G services. Of them, there are only 6 that don't have Huawei involved in that technology. 15 of them are reliant on the Chinese company for the delivery of a third of their 5G sites, according to European telecoms experts. Germany has ordered its telecoms providers to ensure that the 5G core is free from Chinese components from either Huawei or ZTE before the end of 2026. And the European Commission Vice President Henna Virkkunen has suggested converting a 2020 recommendation to stop using so-called high-risk vendors in mobile phone networks into a formal European Union legal requirement. If such a proposal passed, then EU countries would be compelled to comply with the security guidance from the European Commission, facing infringement procedures or financial penalties if they failed to do so. Now, who could replace Huawei and ZTE in European telecoms networks? Well, for that answer, the EU could look to the UK and what happened there after the government banned Huawei from mobile phone networks due to national security concerns and ordered all Huawei equipment to be removed by the end of 2027. Two of the mobile phone world's former heavyweights, Nokia and Ericsson, both are Nordic firms. Both of them are now invested more in mobile phone software than mobile phone handsets. Well, they stepped in to secure capacity, showing that there are options open to the EU if it chooses to hang up on Chinese companies. For CNA, I'm Ross Cullen in Paris.
A lot to unpack here, so let's bring in Antonio Calcara, Head of Geopolitics and Technology at the Center for Security, Diplomacy and Strategy at VUB Brussels University. Well, thanks, Professor, for joining us this evening. First, the big picture on Europe's dependence. We heard from Ross Cullen there. More than 30 European countries rolling out 5G, 15 heavily reliant on Chinese kit, 6 with no Huawei at all. What does that tell you in terms of how deeply reliant, Europe has locked itself into Chinese telecoms technology?
Absolutely. The Europeans are currently dependent on Chinese telecom vendors. So Chinese companies long penetrated the 4G market, and then they have positioned themselves as leaders in the 5G market. So they offer the most competitive products at best prices. I think the United States and some European allies, they started to realize that actually relying on Chinese companies for 5G networks pose some sort of security concerns. But the European response about these security concerns was really heterogeneous. So some member states, they started to ban completely Chinese companies from their 5G networks. And Sweden, for instance, is an example of that. Others, they started to exclude high-risk suppliers. Many others are actually imposing some restriction on a case-by-case assessment. And the European Union has a 5G toolbox, but it's not binding. This still remains a national competence.
So, I hear what you are saying here, that on paper, the Commission, it wants all the EU states to fall into line. But in practice, different countries are moving at very different speeds. Do you think this fragmentation can actually weaken the EU's hand with Beijing?
Absolutely. The lack of unity in the 5G, but also in other critical technological sectors, of course, weaken the European position vis-a-vis other international players, be they China, but also the United States in other type of technologies. When it comes to 5G more specifically, of course, the European member states are in a very difficult situation. On the one hand, they understand and they are starting to realize the security concerns that are posed by being dependent on other states when it comes to critical infrastructures. On the other hand, relying on European providers, for instance, Nokia and Ericsson, so two European providers that were very well positioned in the 5G, requires some more investments and probably more gradual approach towards technological competitiveness. So the idea and really the concern of the European member states is what to choose between security imperatives and competitiveness and more innovation imperatives on the other hand.
So, of course, Beijing is watching all of these timelines very closely. If we line up the timelines, for instance, Germany's got the 2026 target, UK's 2027, and the prospect of also new EU legislation. So, Professor, from Beijing's point of view, though, I mean, where do you expect them to push back? Is it trade retaliation or pressure on individual member states? How do you see that turning out?
I think the Chinese, they will basically just start to frame the 5G issue as a market-based decision and not as a security decision, and they already have done so. So when there was the debate about whether or not, for instance, to ban Huawei, Chinese embassies and delegations around the world, they were saying that this was a market-based decision and nothing to do with security. So I expect the Chinese government to push on the market element, saying we are providing the best products at the best prices. I also expect Chinese companies to try to have more security assurance to the Europeans. For instance, try to open cybersecurity center in order to convince the Europeans that there is no risk when it comes to relying on Chinese providers. And only as a weapon of last resort, I expect some sort of market retaliation. So the Chinese, of course, are very careful about that, because right now they need the European markets when it comes to export, and they know that in the European market, for instance, when it comes to 5G, there are still big market opportunities.
And I think that's where the diplomacy we're seeing this week, right? I mean, both countries playing nice to each other. We've got Macron meeting President Xi. We've also got the German foreign minister is also going to be visiting Beijing. So when you put these two missions side by side, I mean, happening, pretty much just a day apart, what does that tell you about where Europe as a whole, is trying to take its relationship with China when it comes to trade and technology?
I think the Europeans are going to Beijing, and this is valid both for France and Germany, with a clear message. The Europeans are more and more concerned about the trade imbalances between China and Europe. Macron also said that the Chinese government is to stimulate more domestic consumptions and reduce exports. At the same time, they are also mentioning some sort of economic opportunities about, for instance, Chinese investments in the European territory. When it comes to trade imbalances, I have strong doubts that this European visit could make any sort of difference, because on the one hand, of course, the Chinese could exploit the kind of difficult relationship that right now the European countries have with the United States. On the other hand, I think the Chinese government is trying to make China more and more self-sufficient and more competitive in critical technological sectors. So I have strong doubts that the European visit in Beijing and to ask Beijing to more balance in the trade and technological relationship will be successful.
Okay, so let's try to read the road ahead in the next 6 to 12 months. What are some of the key signs that you'll be watching out for that will be telling us whether this telecoms dispute, is it manageable, or is it going to tip into a much wider sort of EU-China confrontation over tech and trade?
I think both. The thing that we should all look on are first, and it was already mentioned, the European legislation. So whether the European Union will be able to convince the member states on the need to have a more coordinated and integrated approach when it comes to 5G, more specifically. So the need, at least for the core, the backbone of 5G, to be completely without any sort of high-risk vendors. So this is the first thing to look at, so more intra-European negotiation. When it comes to trade and technology, I think 5G is indeed part of a broader package. And there I see Europe pushing more and more for technological sovereignty, so the ability to invest in European products. And also there is a debate right now about a so-called buy European preference. So the need for the Europeans to really rely on their own vendors when it comes to critical infrastructures. And there, I think both China, but also the United States, because the Europeans, they are depending on other US vendors when it comes to other type of technologies, will start to react against the push for European technological sovereignty.
It's been great speaking with you. Thanks so very much for your time and insights, Professor Antonio Calcara from Brussels University. And I'm afraid that's all the time we have for you on this Monday's edition of East Asia Tonight. Hope you've enjoyed it. Don't forget, you can get your headlines anytime at cna.asia. Thanks for watching.